Hi, Rob McNeely here. It's a pleasure for me to be having this conversation with Bill O'Hanlon. A lot of people know about him, and I hope that after this interview, more people will know about him and want to follow what he's up to. Bill, thanks for being part of this call.
Thank you, Rob. We've known each other for so many years. It's so great to see you. I love this new technology that we can be together when I don't have to fly and get jet lagged, and you don't have to fly and get jet lagged. We've done that a few times, but this is wonderful.
Yeah. I think I was the person who invited you to Australia the first time.
I don't think that. I know that. That's true. I remember coming down there. It was great.
Okay, so could you just give some general comments about, some people might not know about you. It seems ridiculous if they don't, but some people mightn't. Just a bit about your background and how come you're doing the work that you're doing.
No, whenever you start to get big-headed, you meet somebody who's a psychotherapist or a hypnotherapist who has no idea who you are, and it's always good and humbling. So that's good for me to stay humble. Well, I'll tell you a little about how I I met Milton Erickson in 1973 when I was a student at university. My parents had helped me a little through university, but here in the States we have to pay for it mostly, and I had to work part-time at the art gallery. He came to the art gallery, and I met him there. He was in his wheelchair, and by that time in his life, and I helped him up and down quite a steep grade to the art gallery. So actually, Roxana still remembers me because she was very skeptical whether we could get him up and down this very, almost not quite 90 degrees, but it was a very steep thing that was made for deliveries rather than wheelchairs. And they weren't wheelchair accessible at the time. And I just remember he made such an impression on me. And when he left the art gallery, someone said, "Do you know who that was?" And I said, "No." And they said, "You should. You're a psychology major." He was a famous psychiatrist, Milton Erickson. And I followed up from there. And long story short, I had no money, but I wanted to study with him. So we ended up working out a barter that I would be his gardener while I was in graduate school for learning from him. So that was my first exposure to Erickson.
That was the O'Hanlon Gardening Service, yes?
O'Hanlon Gardening Service. It's a longer story we won't get into now, but while I was in graduate school, I studied with him, and I mostly was interested in his psychotherapy because I had decided I wanted to be a psychotherapist. That's another long story why I decided that, but I became interested in helping people relieve suffering, and I'd gone through some earlier suffering in my life that made me interested in the whole field of psychology and of psychotherapy. And so I was so attracted to Erickson's approach to psychotherapy because he seemed an optimistic person, a person who believed that people could change and they could change fairly rapidly. And much of the rest of what I'd come across in psychotherapy was, I would say, on the discouraging side, either focused on what was wrong with people and how they were broken and they were full of deficits or pathology, or how it was going to take years and years to change. So I found his optimism very refreshing, and I was certainly attracted to that. But to tell you the truth, I was very wary of hypnosis. I had, like most people do, this cartoon or stage hypnosis image or movie image of hypnosis, and it frankly frightened me. I was very frightened of it. And I got over that when I studied with Milton Erickson because you couldn't not learn hypnosis or see hypnosis demonstrated or experience hypnosis when you're around Milton Erickson. And I'm glad in a certain way, and we're going to talk about this, that he was my main exposure to hypnosis because I've since seen other things that warranted that fear, I think. But his approach seemed more benevolent to me and less manipulative, less frightening, less from the outside in. We'll talk about that.
Yes, yes.
And so I've gone on to become a psychotherapist, I should say a little. And I was so upset about this very negative approach to psychotherapy and to change that I determined that I would be part of, and I know you are too, the changing of the field of psychotherapy. I was a follower of, and a great admirer of Buckminster Fuller, who I know you know about as well. And Bucky said, when someone asked him one time, what would you like on your tombstone? He said, "Call me Trim Tab." And I was like, "Call me Trim Tab? What does that mean?" Well, Bucky was a sailor and a student of naval history, and I guess a Trim Tab was a thing that was invented when they started to develop boats that were so big you couldn't turn them in the ocean because the water pressure was so strong when you tried to turn the rudder that essentially the rudder was stuck in one position. So some clever naval engineer created a thing called a trim tab, which is a rudder on a rudder. You could turn it a little, and it created enough water pressure and enough leverage to be able to turn the big rudder on these Queen Mary ships and this size ship. And Buckminster Fuller thought of himself as a trim tab. And I started thinking of myself as a trim tab. If I could make some small contribution to move the field of psychotherapy and hypnotherapy later in a more positive and helpful direction, that maybe I could do that. So I went on to, because of my upset about how psychotherapy was going, I went on to write over 30 books. I think I'm on 36 now. I've sort of lost track. But and I've spoken all over the world, in part in Australia and all over the world, trying to plant these little seeds, being a little trim tab in the field of psychotherapy. So that's me.
Yeah, that's great. There's something beautiful about the trim tab. I mean, change in any for any of us that brings a certain emotion of fear. So, and the bigger the change, the bigger the fear, and we can easily get stuck in that. But some small change, some small trim tab for us personally, for us as therapists, and even for the field, that's really great.
Well, it's one of the things that I learned from Milton Erickson, who was not such a let's psychoanalyze your life. He was sometimes, let's make a small change and then follow that in whatever direction it goes.
Yes, great. So, Bill, as I mentioned to you before we started recording, the history of this is that I'm interested to put it out there so that more people can know about the possibility of hypnosis, and Ericksonian hypnosis in particular. I think a lot of people don't know, or there's so much misinformation about hypnosis. But could you make some comments about why, in your experience, why people have wanted to learn about hypnosis, or why would someone who is a therapist or a counselor or a psychotherapist, what would be the benefit for them of learning hypnotic principles or hypnosis as itself? What do you say about that?
Well, I think that when I learned hypnosis, before I learned hypnosis, I was somewhat affected with a certain range of problems that came to see me. Anxiety and depression and behavioral problems, things like that. But there were certain things I just couldn't seem to touch. I couldn't seem to influence. And they were more typically in the somatic realm or the automatic realm. If someone woke up with night terrors, I could work with them on their stress. I could work with them on fear, maybe responding differently to these night terrors, but I couldn't get directly to the night terrors. I remember the first time someone came in after I'd done hypnosis for many years, and they said, "Can you treat warts? I have warts, intractable warts on my hands." Now, as a psychotherapist, maybe I could have done some mind-body healing, some stress relief, things like that, but I went directly for the warts, and within 3 sessions, no more warts. And I used to see this woman around town, actually, and she would always wave her hands at me and go, "More warts." She'd see me across the room, "No more warts." And I remember thinking, I could have never done that as a therapist. So the short answer is hypnosis gives you a broader range of repertoire of problems that you can directly influence and intervene in. And so therefore, I could help more people and relieve more suffering because I learned hypnosis.
How do you understand the way that did broaden the range of your way to help? What's that about? Why?
Well, I divide the world of problems, artificially, but it's a useful heuristic for me, into voluntary, deliberate problems. That is, if you say, you come in and you say, I've got a short fuse and I tend to yell at my children when they're acting up, when they're getting up my nose. And that would be a deliberate problem. I mean, you know, your anger maybe is more non-voluntary, but you could restrain yourself. Sometimes you get so mad at your kids you want to shake them, but you don't shake them. Most of us don't shake them, right? That's a voluntary thing. So I would call that a voluntary problem. I would say if you say every time I walk into the supermarket or the shopping mall, I break out into a rash, that's more in the non-voluntary, non-deliberate realm. And what I think is hypnosis, for whatever reason, and I have my ideas about this and you have your ideas, and I know you've talked to Michael Yapko and you'll talk to other people, we all have our ideas, but for some reason hypnosis lets us get our hand on the control knob of non-voluntary, what you might call automatic experience, more somatic, physiological, neurological, deep emotional, I guess you might say, and perceptual, anything that you couldn't, you know, the stuff that the holy men in India, or the fakirs, I think they call them F-A-K-I-R, they could, you know, they could stop their breathing, slow down their heart rate. Most of us can't do that. But if you haven't studied that and deliberately learned how to stop your bleeding or change your heart rate or change your body temperature, for most of us that's in the realm of the non-voluntary. That's the stuff hypnosis is really good at, that you couldn't automatically make yourself deaf or tone deaf or colorblind. You wouldn't know how to do that, but we all have that ability, neurologically, physiologically, perceptually, and I think hypnosis gives you access to that stuff, gives you the control knob for that stuff for whatever reason, and I have my ideas again, but that's a complicated theory, I think.
And to add to the list, maybe we could add immunological processes too. I mean, I'm not sure about that. But
yeah, physiological, neurological, immunological. Yeah. I mean, your background is in medicine. It's that stuff that usually if you said to someone, hey, just jack up your chi cells right now, really, that's really going to be helpful for the next period. You're going to need that. They wouldn't know how to do that. But for some reason, when we work with people in a trance, we can say your immune system could now start to work more effectively and efficiently, and it could go right to the place where you need it. You could have more blood flow to the place you need it. You could have more immunological response, more different blood chemistry, all sorts of stuff that we don't really know consciously. Sometimes we know medically. We can get in there and change things a little medically, and who knows, in 100 years we might be able to do a lot more of that stuff. Genetic, epigenetic changes, neuroplastic changes, we might be able to control them more, but right now we're still we don't exactly know how to do it for the most part.
And would you then, from what you're saying, exclude hypnosis as relevant to non-voluntary, to voluntary activities?
Well, that's why I said it's kind of a heuristic, and it's an artificial distinction, because of course if you think something like smoking, there are non-voluntary aspects of smoking, there are voluntary aspects. I mean, you walk down to the shop and you buy the cigarettes. That's a voluntary part. You pick up the cigarette, you put it in your mouth, you strike a match or a lighter, and you light it. Those are voluntary aspects. But then there's the craving for the cigarette. That's more non-voluntary. There's changes in your, vasodilation as you smoke. Maybe it relaxes you a little. Those are non-voluntary. So I think practically, most everything is a combination of voluntary and non-voluntary things. I'll just give you a little follow-up. I was once teaching a workshop on hypnosis, and someone came up to me during the break and said, you said that the research says smoking, it's about 20-25% success rate with hypnosis if you do a 2-year follow-up. He said, I get 97% success rate with smoking. I said, God, you're much better than the average. How do you do it? And he said, well, I tell people when they call me for hypnosis for stopping smoking, I say, I got to know you're motivated. So you have to stop smoking for 3 days before I'll do the hypnosis with you. Now, that effectively the voluntary aspect, because if you can stop smoking for 3 days, you're through the worst of the physiological dependence, or, the worst first part of it. And so he was screening out 97% of the people who wouldn't do that, couldn't do that, didn't feel they could do it. And of course, he'd get a higher success rate. If they're that motivated, I want all my clients. It's like saying to someone who drinks, stop drinking and then I'll treat you for your alcoholism. That would be really easy. Stop drinking for a couple of days, and, for a week or for a month, and then I'll treat you. That makes it easy. You get the more motivated people, and they've already gone through the worst of it. So I think, again, most things are a combination of voluntary and not.
Yes, yes. And I've noticed that people are different. I mean, you can say, for example, with cigarettes, it's a voluntary thing to put a cigarette in your mouth, but some people have a story where they say, I can't help it. It just happens. I can't stop it. It's like smoking does it.
Yeah, and for some people, it's become that automatic where they don't even notice. But, I treated a woman who was pulling out her hair, trichotillomania is the classic term for that, the diagnostic term, and she did not notice when she was doing it. At that point, it had become non-voluntary, more automatic. So again, this is kind of a false dichotomy. But yeah, I think you can use a combination. And I would typically, if I were working with somebody with smoking or weight control, I would do the behavioral, voluntary, deliberate, change your thinking, change your framework, as well as the non-voluntary hypnotic stuff. So I think, again, I wouldn't make that distinction so clearly. Some things are clearly more for hypnosis, some things are clearly less, but most things are a combination. And I think we've talked about this before, but years ago, I was talking to Jay Haley, and he said that he'd edited out in the transcripts of his conversations with Erickson, his and Weakland's, all the hypnotic interventions, because he wanted to do a book just on Erickson's non-hypnotic interventions. And I thought, Erickson didn't make that distinction. No. He put them together, and I do too, and I'm sure you do too.
Okay, so in coming back to the question, what benefit would therapists have by learning hypnosis? That would, even with the voluntary aspects of voluntary problems, there's some additional contribution that hypnosis can make.
You could be a little more effective or a lot more effective with some of the things that for some reason hadn't yielded to your usual techniques. And I would say, let me tell you just a second thing that I think I got as a side benefit from learning hypnosis, and is much more known these days, but wasn't known when I studied with Dr. Erickson. And that was, I realized how plastic, how changeable people's experience was. Because I was taught mostly as a psychotherapist, or in my psychology training, that personality was pretty fixed, that perception was pretty fixed, that brain structure was pretty fixed, that neurological patterns were pretty fixed, and that physiological immune problems or situations were pretty fixed. And what I got from Erickson was, I saw him change things that I didn't think were changeable, but I saw them change with people, perceptual stuff, physiological, neurological things. And of course, he changed those himself. So I became convinced once I learned hypnosis how changeable people were. And again, as a psychotherapist, that is a good thing, not just to know intellectually, but actually to see right in front of you and week by week that people can radically change things that we previously thought were maybe set or fixed structure. So that's what's possible.
So piggybacking on one of your main contributions, I would say that, from my experience, hypnosis increases the range of possibilities, things which had previously been felt by a client or thought by professionals to be unchangeable. It doesn't mean that hypnosis can cure everything and change everything, but it becomes a possibility. So at least there's an area for exploration and maybe for healing and for change. Maybe.
Yeah, I began to call my work possibility therapy because I was so interested in who knows where the person can change and who knows what those physiological, neurological, genetic, epigenetic limits are, immunological limits. I really don't know, and I prefer not to close them down before we make an attempt to find those limits. And usually, I don't find them very easily. That is, if I can find another way to approach it, some other possibility opens up. And so, yeah, I'm, we're on the same page with that, which is why we've liked and known each other for so long. We're both possibilitists, I guess.
and to make the distinction that this is not New Age. We're not just saying, oh, go into a trance and everything is going to be wonderful. Go into hypnosis and you can cure everything. You can levitate, you can grow an extra arm or whatever. This is not New Age. It's not definite. It's just, as you say, not confining or concretizing the limits so that we actually don't know where they are.
Yeah. Well, again, it's such a sensitivity to language, interaction, and observation that you realize how many more possibilities when sometimes we think we're stuck. I had a personal experience of this when I was younger. One time I was out of work for a while, and I just felt desperate. I just thought, I'm never going to get a job, and I'm running out of money, and I'm really desperate. And I sat down and listed all the things I hadn't done yet. And there were 12 possibilities that I hadn't tried yet. And within a week, I had a job.
Okay.
It wasn't that it was magical. It was that I kept pushing against the possibilities because who knows which possibility is going to open up.
Yeah.
And as long as I thought there were no possibilities, I felt pretty hopeless. When I thought there were possibilities, I could keep moving forward until I could find an opening to something where something could change. And I think that's akin to what we're doing in this possibility and the hypnotic process. I usually lay out a smorgasbord of possibilities, and I'm not sure which will appeal to the person and which will actually yield effects. So I'd rather give them a bunch of possibilities, and if none of them do, as you say, none of them do, then we have to come up with another smorgasbord and another menu or set of possibilities, and until we can find something, until we give up and stop, I guess.
Now that leads on to the next question about not just hypnosis in general, but Ericksonian hypnosis in particular. And I think you already started to address that.
I did, and I think, as I said earlier, hypnosis frankly frightened me. It really frightened me when I first thought about it, because I thought somebody could kind of get inside me and make me do things.
Yeah.
And what was so reassuring about Dr. Erickson's work was, as Stephen Carroll Langton wrote their book, The Answer Within, he was much more interested in evocation rather than adding something from the outside or maneuvering something from the outside. It's not that he didn't have an influence on people, because what got evoked was definitely not random, but it was more of an evocation. And again, if you think of your context, the classic thing that most people know about in the States, know about Australia, is that you have kangaroos and that you are overrun with rabbits at a certain point because somebody introduced rabbits and they weren't native to the ecology, and something went weird, because there were no natural predators or something. I don't know, but whether it's a myth or not, I think we all know that idea. Is that what reassured me about Erickson's approach, which was more of an evocative approach, is he wasn't going to add alien objects from the outside. His ideas about what you should do with your life, he was going to evoke from you things that were already there, maybe nascent, maybe not well developed, but were seeds of possibilities, or were already well developed possibilities and skills and resources. And what I got from Erickson in his approach to psychotherapy and hypnosis was that he was really good at evoking, and he was focused on resources and skills and abilities rather than those deficits and pathologies I talked about earlier. And he would search and search, even things that looked like problems or illness could be resources. You could say denial is a wonderful resource. Sometimes it doesn't serve you well, but sometimes it can really serve you well. And so that appealed to me, this kind of honoring and valuing of this person's, all of their processes, to say, I wonder how that could be used, rather than for, hurting the person or suffering, how it could be used for healing. And boy, that appealed to me. And there was a gentleness that I liked that was different from what I saw in the stage hypnosis or the classic movie hypnosis, or even some of the clinical hypnosis that I saw. The roll your eyes back in your head, count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It seems so authoritarian, and I was kind of a gentle soul. I didn't like that authoritarian thing. I didn't like people telling me or other people what to do. And Erickson instead would be gently invitational. You could do this. You might do this. You don't have to do it the way I tell you to do it. You can do it in your own way. And that appealed to me so much. Maybe the humanistic person's psychology orientation I had, maybe the kind of 60s mentality I had of, let people do their thing, not your thing. And that converted me to, I still find it hard to do traditional approaches to hypnosis. I find them a little creepy, a little intrusive, and I'm a bit uncomfortable being that authoritarian and telling people what to do. Close your eyes, go deeper. Ooh, that stuff creeps me out.
It may be part of our shared Irish background too. Like we don't like being told what to do.
British.
If you tell me what to do, you've got a headbutt fight to the death. But if you invite me to do something, that's very different.
Well, but I think that's basic human psychology.
Sure.
It's not just the Irish. Maybe we have it more than others, perhaps. But I think it's human psychology. There's a classic movie when I was growing up, and it had a song in it, and the parents were lamenting how the teenagers were rebelling. And he says, "Why do the kids put beans in their ears?" And he says, "Because we tell them not to put beans in their ears. That's why they put beans in their ears." And I think it's that way. As soon as you tell people, relax, some people are going to over-comply and they're not going to be in hypnosis. And some people are going to have that natural opposition, that oppositionality, like you can't tell me what to do or you can't make me do this. And so I love that invitational approach, which doesn't elicit that kind of oppositional response, or it does much less, I guess.
And also it fits in with Maturana's, biological observations that organisms are structure determined. All we can do is influence, perturb, and perturbate what's already there. He makes the comment that you can't make a washing machine create toast. You can't make a toaster wash clothes. You have to work with the structure that's there. And I saw that with Erickson, and as an ongoing learning for me to.
Well, and for me, again, that leads to one more interesting thing. I think traditional hypnosis views hypnosis as something you do to someone.
Yes.
And I think that one of the things that is so clear when you convert to Erickson's sensibility about things is it's a conversation and an interaction between people. It's something we're doing together. And that's why he was opposed to like recording things to make people go into trance, because it was such an interactional and responsive thing. And again, that's the thing that appealed to me. It wasn't one size fits all. It was, this is your trance that we're doing together. And I'm often going into a kind of a trance while I'm doing trance with the person because we're in such close connection. I'm in a working trance. Hopefully they're in a healing trance or, some sort of possibility shifting trance. But it's something we're doing together, not something I'm doing to you. And that appeals to me again because of that don't maneuver me or manipulate me or make me do things stance that I have and you have.
I've noticed that it's another example of the good news is the bad news. With the Ericksonian approach, with the traditional approach, you've got your script, you've got your diagnoses, you're all set. It's like being in the army. You do this, you do that, and then if it doesn't work, well, the client's not ready or they're resistant. So with this approach, the bad news is we never know what's going to happen. We don't know what to do. And the good news is we never know what's going to happen. We don't know what to do. So,
right, I think that it is the good news and the bad news. And I think when you're a beginning therapist or hypnotherapist, you tend to gravitate towards that certainty because
yes.
You have a bit of anxiety about, am I going to, performance anxiety and this responsibility. And, I certainly had that at first as well, but because I'd had this background, after a while, you realize, the answer is always going to be in this interaction and conversation. I have no idea how it's going to emerge. And at first, it looks like nothing's going to happen sometimes. And then something starts to happen. Mm-hmm. And then when that happens, it is so powerful. It's magical. It's spiritual to me. It's profoundly touching to me because I am totally clear I didn't do it to them. Mm-hmm. I am totally clear that it emerged from our relationship and our conversation and our interaction, and from something beyond, it seems to me. Something beyond the two of us that, Robert Bly said, anytime there's two people, there's a third person that emerges from that. And it's almost like a third person doing this hypnosis, or third entity that arises between us that's bigger than both of us and that guides us through this process and leads us towards the healing possibilities. So that's profound for me. I'm a little bit of a trance junkie at this point in that, I find that state to be such a profound connection with people, spiritual and deep and sacred kind of thing. To me, that's why, again, I'm biased towards this Ericksonian thing, because it isn't formulaic and it isn't script-based. It's relationally based and it's improvisational and it's magical, as I say, magical.
Yes. Paradoxically, as you say, of the beginning therapist, I've noticed in teaching programs that when people see that it's not them, it's the client, it can take the pressure off them from an early stage. And it's often quite a relief when they say, oh, it's not me.
Yeah.
So,
I think that's when they do get that concept. But
yes.
first, most of us
Yes.
don't
Sure.
even tell people.
Yeah.
You're not making it happen and you're not responsible for having to have it happen. That if they get that, you're right. It's profoundly relaxing. It was profoundly relaxing to me when I started to work this way hypnotically and psychotherapeutically. I used to think I had to be so much more clever.
Yes.
And read so much more and figure out so much more, know every little diagnostic category and know every little study. And then I realized, it's nice to know some of that stuff, but really the wisdom is in this conversation now.
Mm. Yes, it's an unusual emphasis that you're making, and it's one that I share very passionately, that it's not a technique. We're not doing mechanical interventions on machines. It's organic, It's and that's to me, I agree. It's the sacred part of this work. It
is powerful. I mean, it's not that you can't learn some patterns and some guidelines.
Sure.
But they are so variable, and there's a little something to hold on to, and that's why we teach it, and that's why we write about it. But I would say it's so much more open that I find it. It's been a lot of years for you, and it's been a lot of years for me because we both studied with Erickson back in the 1970s, and that carbon dates us. And I still have not come to the end of my learning about and fascination with hypnosis. I expect that I will never come to the end of it because of that improvisational N of one. Every person that I see is different. Every encounter that I have is different, magical and mysterious. And I still learn as the years go on. I think if I'd done traditional approaches, you could really, you could learn all those scripts and you could learn which ones to use for phobias and which ones to use for pain and which ones to use for that. And that would be about the end of it. Maybe, I don't know, because I've never really pursued that kind of mastery of that approach. This, I have a feeling of mastery, but it's only that mastery of letting go and trusting in the wiser entity that arises between us. Yeah. So I did get to a sense of mastery, but I won't get to a sense of the end of the learning of it forever, I don't think.
Before I met Erickson, I used to use hypnosis in the traditional way. Look at the spot, close your eyes, you're getting sleepy, relax your toes. And it was so boring, I had trouble staying awake. It was awful. It was just agonizing. And I don't know who it was, but someone asked Erickson, just I think a couple of weeks before he died, what he'd learned about him, how his learning was around hypnosis. And he said something like, well, I've been doing this for more than 50 years. I think I'm just starting to get the hang of it.
That's nonsense, too. It's been, I don't know, so how many years? I met him in 73, and I started studying with him in 77. So it's been a lot of years.
Yeah. You're heading up towards 40.
I'm getting warmed up. With you.
There's such a difference between having the answer so that you can survive and having the question so that you can have a sense of liveness,
Yeah, it is fascinating. And again, it's what I like about psychotherapy. If you have a certain approach, it's again always an N of one. You go in there totally anew. Not that you don't know anything,
Yes.
but what you know may be of limited use with this particular person, this particular moment, and that's why I find it endlessly fascinating. I mean, it's a great profession to be in a certain way.
Yes. Another question, Bill, and that is, if someone wanted to, they start to see, hypnosis could be a contribution to me and my work, and either traditional or Ericksonian hypnosis in particular could. What have you noticed as helpful for people to learn this approach? What's your experience with this?
Well, I think there's a few things that one could say. I certainly learned the most from watching it done, experiencing hypnosis for myself. So I sort of knew what it was like from the inside, and then doing it and learning it with other people, if you will, noticing their responses, noticing what worked and what didn't. So I think those experiential learnings are probably, observational experiential learnings are probably the most powerful. But I also was a bit lost at the beginning. It's like, well, what do I do? How do I do this? And so I think that reading some of the books, there are a number of books out about, especially Ericksonian hypnosis, that I think are great. And now, again, there's live courses, there's online courses. I think those are great. I know you have online courses. I have online courses because we can get to more people. We don't have to travel around the world so much, and people can do it at their own rate and pace. But I think those are the main ways that I think are good to learn it. But, if you've never experienced it, never seen it, I think it's a little harder to get it, to do it even, but, even to believe in it. Because if you don't know it experientially, it's an intellectual thing. But as we've just been talking about almost this whole conversation, it's the experience of it that's so moving. And so somehow get some experience, live experience.
Mm-hmm. There are even reading books, particularly your book, Solution-Oriented Hypnosis, which is a transcript of a training program. There are some books that are written intellectually about something, explaining something. And there are other books that actually help to generate. Sid Rosen's book, for example, My Voice Will Go With You. I challenge anyone to read that and stay out of trance. It's just so charming and so non-intrusive that it's irresistible.
Well, I think that's right, and I think maybe you're pointing to something that I think is so important. Find teachers, books, programs that engage you experientially, and that doesn't mean they all put you in trance. I've certainly gone to some of those programs, but that somehow are charming and engaging and create experiences, And then that's a hard thing to do in writing, but the best writing does it. I think some of Sid's writing, which was kind of transcription somewhat of Erickson, that can evoke some of that stuff. So find those teachers, find those books, find those training programs, find those audios, videos, anything that can help you have an experience. And you can have it while you're having an intellectual understanding as well. So that's cool.
Mm. It's fascinating. Some people have said, how can you learn hypnosis online independently? When, as you say, experiential learning is probably the pivotal aspect of it. So how can someone learn it from an online program? I know they can, but how can we?
I say that because the first online program I ever did was on hypnosis. And I was a little skeptical when it was suggested to me because of the same concern that you just talked about. And we did actually an assessment. I had done the same training program in a 3-day context at a large conference yearly. So we decided to do a beginning assessment of how much do they know about hypnosis, how comfortable were they, what kind of things do they use with hypnosis. Some people had never had any background in hypnosis, and some people had. And then at the end of the 3-day course, how much did they use it, how much were they confident about it, what experience had they had, and then we did a month-long follow-up. And then we did that with the online course, and it turned out with the online course, people were using it more. Okay. And doing more things. And that initially surprised me, but when I thought about it more deeply, Number one, they had more time to do it. They could go over the material again. When you're in a live context, you're trying to take it all in at once. You get really enthusiastic when you're there, but sometimes you chicken out or losing your enthusiasm as the days and the weeks go on. Say, oh, I need to go to another program before I really try that. You know, you lose your confidence. And this was ongoing confidence building over time, and people had specific assignments. They were supposed to go out each week and do something. So I think you can learn it online, and that convinced me that you can learn it online. And since then, I've been a great proponent of online for all sorts of stuff, you know, to learn all sorts of things. And hypnosis being the most surprising one for me.
That is surprising.
People do learn it, but again, you can have experiences online. Just talk to the people who are on Facebook 24 hours a day. You know, they're having experiences online. They're, you know, people that watch YouTube. I go to YouTube video, I'm laughing, I'm crying, I'm moved by a YouTube video. Online can create experiences. I think, you know, we're having a conversation right here, even though we're continents away and thousands of miles away, because we've got some of that nonverbal stuff. So find a training program that has video, some audio, where you can get the nuances of human communication. Find a book that's so well written. Now, we've all read novels that created deep experiences for us, or nonfiction books that really moved us and excited us. So writing can induce experiences, video can induce experiences, exercises that you're given online can induce experiences, but make sure you get it in your bones, your experience, rather than just in that noggin up there.
Yes, I agree. And to me, that's you're getting at the point and the pivotal basis of hypnosis is that it's bodily felt, it's an experience, it's not conceptual, it's real, which is why it sticks, why it lasts, why it.
I think that's right. I think that any psychotherapy, you know, what's the difference between psychotherapy that makes a difference, psychotherapy that doesn't? Psychotherapy that's just ideas, goes in one ear, out the other ear, and doesn't stick, doesn't have a behavioral consequence, doesn't have an experiential consequence. But if you get it in your experience and it moves you to some new possibility or some change, then it can be powerful. So that's the call of hypnosis to me, is that it tends to bypass all that intellectual yada yada, and it goes right to experience. So it's, you know, like people who do body work, they tend to go past that kind of, we can talk about our issues endlessly. Sometimes that changes them, but often it doesn't. But if we have an experience, we're often moved to change.
Yeah. Okay, so we've been talking for a while, and you said something about your background and how come you got into this weird way of spending time and life, and something about why hypnosis in general can be helpful to many therapists in whatever field, and why Ericksonian hypnosis in particular can contribute to the effectiveness and I would say the personal well-being of us therapists. And also, you've made some comments about how, if someone were interested to learn about hypnosis, what might be helpful. That's something of what we've been spending time discussing here. And I'm just wondering, if you look back over what we've said, what is there anything else that you might want to add or emphasize or correct or retract or whatever?
No, it's an interesting thing because we meet these people all the time, and you and I are one of them. I think sometimes when you find your tribe, your approach, the person or the people that you feel comfortable with, not everybody is going to go for this approach. But boy, when I came across it, something in me responded. It resonated with me. It called to me. And if something in this that we've been talking about is calling to you, you know, I've learned here's my growing edge. Whenever I'm doing something, whatever I find daunting or frightening, really daunting or frightening, that's like too much, it's too scary, or I don't think I can do it, it's beyond me, it's beyond my comfort zone, and I feel this deep longing or resonance with it or interest in it or calling to it, those places where it scares the hell out of me or challenges the hell out of me, and I feel this deep attraction to it, that's where my growing edge is. So if we said something that's touched the heart of somebody, and they said, yeah, that sounds like something I really want to know about. Certainly Erickson was like that for you. You flew across the world to go see this fellow. I flew across the city. I drove across the city to go and see him. But I went anywhere after that to learn anything I could about his stuff. And if you're lucky enough to come across one of those callings, please, for your heart and your soul's sake and your life's sake, follow that. And if this is one of those, we're glad that we planted some seeds or we're able to be available to issue the call, I think.
Okay. And to add to that, Bill, if anyone wanted to have more contact with you, they can sign up for your newsletter.
And just go to billohanlon.com. I give away one of my favorite books that I ever wrote, A Lazy Man's Guide to Success, and it's handouts on, right now that's what I'm giving away on the solution-oriented approach, which was the kind of precursor to the possibility therapy approach. And so I give them a little bribe because I know we're all busy, so I'm saying, if you take a moment to sign up for it, I'll give you a bribe because I know you sometimes need an incentive to get yourself to take action. So that's there, and they can keep connected with me. And I write usually a monthly newsletter. I sometimes get a little distracted, but usually it's monthly, and I give a free handout and free cool videos and poems and things like that.
I look forward to your newsletters. And you just skipped over it, but it's billohanlon.com. Is that all one word?
All one word. There's no apostrophe. There's no apostrophes on the web. It's OHANLON. If you wanted to know how to spell it, Bill, yeah.
Okay. And that's great. So that's like a postscript. Is there any postscript? Any kind of last words?
I think if we're talking in terms of how to connect with me, I also coach people how to write books and be speakers and do other things. So you can go to getyourbookWritten.com, and you can also get a free giveaway there. And I'm really excited to help people figure out what they have to contribute to the world, go make that contribution and change the world in a positive way. And maybe we'll create a world that works for everyone.
Yes, that's great. Bill Hanlon, thank you so much for the conversation and a beautiful contribution to people exploring and wondering what and how their passion is and how to follow it. That's just great. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Rob. Good to see you.